The Premier League is about to witness the unthinkable collapse of a giant. Liverpool's dominance is secretly crumbling from within, and the real cause is not what you think. Stay until the final seconds to discover the hidden flaw that even Jurgen Klopp is struggling to fix. The storm did not begin with a single defeat or one bad decision in the summer transfer window. It began quietly, in subtle fractures beneath the surface of what had once looked like an indestructible empire. Liverpool, a club that spent years parading as the benchmark of modern dominance, suddenly found themselves drowning in the strange silence that follows the roar of applause. They were still near the top of the league table, still scoring goals, still adored. Yet behind the curtain of statistics and chance, there were signs unmistakable, unsettling, that something in the heart of Jurgen Klopp's system was cracking. The inevitability that once accompanied Liverpool's football was fading, and the club now lived in the uneasy space between glory and collapse. The chaos did not take long to seep into the spine of their football. In seasons gone by, Liverpool's defense operated like a synchronized orchestra. Virgil van Dijk towering above danger, Ibrahima Konate sweeping up counterattacks, fullbacks pushing forward confidently because they trusted the machine behind them. Now those same spaces were openings for disaster. Long diagonal balls became Liverpool's recurring nightmare, slicing through their structure with shocking ease. Opponents no longer feared pressing high, because even within the first passes of Liverpool's build-up, errors began to appear. Konate was caught in possession, under pressure, dispossessed as attackers sprinted into open fields. Van Dijk hesitated where he once commanded, unsure whether to step forward or retreat, leaving channels wide open. Alisson Becker, once the silent guardian, was forced into desperate rescues far more often than any champion should. The weakness was not isolated to one match. It became a pattern, repeated in the cruel way football often exposes flaws. Crystal Palace saw it, Chelsea smelled it, Galatasaray exploited it. Teams that should have been suppressed were instead emboldened. Liverpool still scored late winners' goals in the 83rd minute and beyond had become a strange lifeline, but even those were acts of survival, not dominance. 8 times they were rescued by the final breaths of a match. 8 times that final roar from the Kop disguised the fact that those games should never have needed saving. And while they stood only 1 point from the top of the league, that statistic felt more like a warning than comfort. Because when a team as big as Liverpool starts surviving instead of conquering, the world begins to whisper the word nobody wants to hear decline. Once, Liverpool's pressing was gospel. The counter-press was their crown jewel. Opponents could not breathe in midfield, could not turn, could not escape. Now that first wall of pressure was easily bypassed. A single sharp pass into midfield, and Liverpool's structure fell apart like wet paper. Where Alexis Mac Allister should have closed down, he hesitated. Where Dominic Szoboszlai once hunted relentlessly, he was now pinned deeper, forced to cover too many roles at once, dragged away from the zones he was built to dominate. Mohamed Salah drifted forward but rarely tracked back, his attacking brilliance suddenly overshadowed by the gaping space behind him. And worst of all, there was no Luis Diaz, no relentless wing harrier to close the wounds on the flanks. His energy was gone, sold to Bayern Munich, and with it vanished a piece of the team's soul. But the core of the problem lay deeper, buried within the midfield. Last season, there was a rhythm to the trio of Wataru Endo, Ryan Gravenberch, and Mac Allister. Now that rhythm was gone, replaced by constant rotation and uncertainty. 10 players fighting for 5 spots, all of them convinced they should start, none of them allowed to settle. Klopp, once a man of unwavering lineups and trust, now seemed to be stitching his team together game by game. Each match a new experiment with no permanent answer. Chemistry turned to confusion. Roles blurred. Some were played out of position, others faded in silence. Even set pieces, once Liverpool's hidden weapon, became their downfall. Corners were not cleared. Long throws were allowed to bounce. Players lost their marks. And as the ball rolled past Alisson into the net, there was no shock on their faces, only the tired look of a team that had seen it coming. That was the worst part. Not the goals they conceded, but that they no longer looked surprised. Yet this story is not about a team drowning without a fight. Liverpool still struck with venom on the counterattack. They still created chances at a rate most clubs could only dream of. Darwin Nunez, Florian Wirtz, Mohamed Salah, they all produced moments of brilliance, but finishing deserted them at crucial moments. Clear chances were lifted over the bar, parried into empty space, or struck straight at goalkeepers who could hardly believe their fortune. They scored 15 goals in 7 league games, but they could easily have doubled that. Wastefulness became a curse. The kind that makes supporters sigh before they even see the replay. Jurgen Klopp stood at the heart of all of it, haunted yet resolute. He was no longer the wide-smiled warrior bouncing on the touchline with electrified fists and fire in his voice. He looked older now, burdened. The laughter was rarer, the defiance quiete. Yet his belief remained. He had rebuilt Liverpool once before, turning them from nearly men into champions of Europe and kings of England. Now he was being asked to do it again, but this time, with the weight of expectation digging into his shoulders. The summer transfer window did not help. The club spent big, yes, but they failed to secure the one signing that mattered most, a new leader in central defense. Instead, they gambled on what they already had, only to realize too late that what they had was no longer enough. The defense cracked, the midfield wobbled, and the tackle, though still sharp, was no longer lethal enough to cover the wounds. Meanwhile, in the background, rumors swirled about players wanting moves, about staff growing impatient, about Klopp himself being linked to other futures. He denied them, but not with the steel of someone certain, more like a man too tired to fight shadows. Still, the league table insisted. Liverpool are 1 point off the summit, and that was true. But numbers do not tell you about the silence in dressing rooms after defeat, or the way eyes stop meeting across the training pitch. Numbers won't tell you when belief starts to drain. Football does not break in a single moment. It erodes like stone beneath water. And Liverpool, though still standing tall, could feel the erosion beneath their feet. But this is only the beginning of the story. Yet, in the middle of this uncertainty, something far more dangerous than tactical weakness began to take shape: doubt. Doubt that slowly crept into the legs of players who once ran without hesitation. Doubt in passes that used to be struck with full conviction. Doubt in clearances, in pressing triggers, in knowing whether to press or hold shape. And doubt is poison in football. It does not destroy instantly. It eats from the inside. That is what made this moment in Liverpool's journey so precarious. The machinery was still intact. The players still elite. The manager still world-class, yet belief. The invisible fuel behind every great team flickered like a dying candle. The fans could feel it too. Anfield remained loud, but not quite the same thunder it once was. The chants still rose, the scarves still waved, but beneath it was something more fragile. When Liverpool conceded first, the atmosphere did not rumble with defiance, it sighed. And when the team turned things around in the dying minutes, the roar that followed felt less like triumph and more like relief. They were still winning some battles, but no one could say with certainty they were winning the war. It was not long before critics turned their attention to the heart of the team, the midfield. Once the foundation of Klopp's identity, Liverpool's midfield now carried the confusion of transition. There was no balance, no constant trio to rely on. Wataru Endo fought bravely, Ryan Gravenberch brought elegance, Alexis Mac Allister offered composure, Dominic Szoboszlai provided relentless energy, yet together they were not a unit. Like pieces of different puzzles forced into the same frame, they worked but not in harmony. And every time the press was broken, the defense stood exposed like an unguarded fortress in the wind. Then came the questions from pundits, the kind that pierced deeper than any defeat. Had Jurgen Klopp demanded too much from his players over the years? Had the relentless pressing, the constant sprinting, the emotional intensity finally taken a toll that could not be reversed? The human body can only endure so much. The human mind, even less. These players had given everything, every muscle, every drop of sweat, every heartbeat for the badge, and now, perhaps for the first time, they looked tired. What hurt most was how avoidable some of the mistakes were. Defensive lapses were not the work of tactical chaos alone, they were human errors. Switches off during corners, a failure to mark the near post, players losing their men at set pieces, long throws being allowed to bounce in the box, simple clearances being misjudged. For a team that once defined discipline, these moments were like cracks in stained glass, small but fatal if left untouched. And yet, hope refused to die. Because for every moment of weakness, Liverpool still produced flashes of the team they used to be. Trent Alexander-Arnold could still split defenses with passes that seemed pulled from another realm. Mohamed Salah still cut inside and curled the ball with the precision of a sniper. Darwin Núñez still made runs that tore backlines apart. Florian Wirtz still drifted between defenders with elegance. There were still games where Liverpool pressed like wolves, where Van Dijk commanded with authority, where Alisson reminded the world why he is one of the best on the planet. But hope alone could not shield them from reality. The Premier League had evolved. Arsenal grew sharper, Manchester City colder and more ruthless, Tottenham daring under new philosophy, and Aston Villa bold enough to dream. Liverpool were no longer the hunters, they were the hunted. Every opponent treated the match as a final. Every mistake was punished. Every weakness exploited. And then there was the question of leadership beyond the pitch. Inside boardrooms, whispers grew louder about contracts, transfers, the future of Klopp's reign. Should more defenders have been signed? Why was a defensive midfielder not secured sooner? Was it the owners failing to act? Or was it Klopp himself, still faithful to players whose best years were already behind them? Even his denial of links to other clubs did not carry the certainty it once did. It was calm, it was measured, but it was not absolute. Yet in the end, it always returned to the pitch, to the grass under the floodlights, to the men in red shirts carrying not just a club's history, but its expectation. They were not broken, just burdened. Liverpool were not falling apart, they were standing at a crossroads. One path led back to greatness, rebuilt through pain, discipline, and reinvention. The other path led to stagnation, where nostalgia replaced ambition and past glory became a heavy chain instead of a proud banner. There were still reasons to believe. Klopp's fire had not gone out, it had only dimmed under exhaustion. Players like Mac Allister, Szoboszlai, and Núñez were not failures, they were raw edges yet to be sharpened. Van Dijk, though older, still possessed the mind of a general. And Anfield, even when uncertain, still held the power to shift games with a single roar. This was not the end of an era. It was a test that decides if the era continues or dies. Football has always been cruel to those who grow comfortable. Liverpool were no exception, but they were never built on comfort, they were built on rebellion, defiance, and resilience. The club that rose from near bankruptcy to Champions League kings did not do so by accepting decline. They fought, they adapted, they evolved, and now they stand once more at the edge of something immense, either revival or ruin. So the question is no longer about who they were. The world knows that story. It is about who they choose to become now. Whether they dig deeper, tighten the fractures, restore the cohesion, and once again make every press, every run, every roar count. Whether they rediscover that burning force that once made them feared across Europe, or whether this slow unraveling becomes the beginning of a fall no one expected. Because greatness does not disappear overnight. It fades, it hesitates, it gasps. And in that gasp lies a choice. Liverpool still have time to choose, but time does not wait forever. Tell us which area of the Liverpool squad needs the most urgent reinforcement. Explain if you still believe this team can challenge for the title. Let us know which player has been the biggest disappointment this season. Share your verdict in the comments and follow for more exclusive football analysis.